Hey, you ever find an old note you wrote to yourself? Maybe it's tucked in a book or crumpled in a coat pocket, and you stare at it, trying to remember what on earth you meant by blue thing, or call him about the stuff. It's a tiny, personal mystery. Now, imagine that note was written 2,000 years ago on copper, and instead of reminding you to buy milk, it claims to list the locations of unimaginable treasure, tons of silver and gold, sacred vessels, hidden across the Judean desert. And nobody can agree if it's a real map, a sacred inventory, or an elaborate ancient hoax. That, my friends, is the maddening, glittering riddle of the Copper Scroll. Hey, welcome back. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is Hidden Histories, the Untold Files. Today, we're diving into one of the most bizarre and captivating artifacts ever found, the Copper Scroll of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's not like the others. While the other scrolls are literary, books of the Bible, community rules, hymns, this one is a list. A brutally practical, strangely worded list of 64 locations and the treasures supposedly buried there. It reads like an ancient scavenger hunt written by an accountant. In the ruin that is in the valley, dig down 4 cubits. A chest of silver, weight, 17 talents. That kind of thing. The sheer specificity is what first makes your heart race. This isn't a parable. It feels like instructions. But here's where the mystery deepens, and where my engineer's brain starts firing questions. The scroll was discovered in 1952 in a cave near Qumran, but it was so corroded, so oxidized, that it couldn't be unrolled. They actually had to cut it into strips. Think about that for a second. We had to physically destroy the object to read it. The first translation was a shock. The language is a form of Hebrew, but it's clunky, with spelling oddities and a Greek word or two mixed in. It feels vernacular, like a working document, not a sacred text. And the treasures it describes are staggering. Over 4,000 talents of gold and silver. 1 talent is about 75 pounds. We're talking about tons of precious metal, plus precious perfumes, and possibly even the sacred vestments of the temple itself. The total value in today's terms? Estimates range into the billions. It's an inventory of almost mythical wealth. So, the immediate romantic theory is that this is a literal treasure map. That during the Jewish revolt against Rome, around 70 AD, priests from the temple in Jerusalem fled into the desert to save their most sacred treasures from the Roman legions. They buried them and recorded the locations in copper, a more durable material than parchment, so the knowledge would survive. It's a compelling story. It fits the timeline, the geography, the desperation of that moment. Expeditions have been mounted, some using advanced ground-penetrating radar, following its cryptic clues. They've looked in cisterns, tombs, and ruins. And yet, not a single shekel, not a single coin from this list has ever been found. Not one. Which leads us to the other major school of thought. What if the treasure isn't physical? What if it's symbolic? Some scholars point out that the amounts are just too vast, too fantastical. They argue the scroll might be a record of a legendary treasure, perhaps from the first temple, written down as a kind of religious folklore. Or, even more intriguingly, that the treasure is spiritual, that the gold and silver are metaphors for wisdom or divine favor. But then, why write it on expensive, durable copper? Why bury it in a cave? You don't go to that kind of trouble for a metaphor. Unless you really, really want that metaphor to be found someday, believing it would have a literal meaning for the finder. And then there's my personal favorite layer of the puzzle, the code of the directions themselves. The scroll doesn't use clear landmarks. It says things like, in the cavity of the old house of tribute, or under the black stone at the mouth of the duct of the ritual bath. Places that would have been obvious 2 millennia ago, but are utterly lost to us now. It's a set of instructions written for insiders, for people who already knew the landscape intimately. It's like me telling a childhood friend from my neighborhood in Dhaka. It's under the 3rd step of the blue house near the old banyan tree. That means nothing to you, but everything to him. The Copper Scroll feels like that, an insider's document. Which begs the question, were the insiders ever meant to retrieve it? Or was it a record that survived its purpose, its context forever erased? This is where the story gets personal for me. I'm an engineer by training, an entrepreneur by choice. I live in a world of problem solving, of concrete solutions. But the Copper Scroll resists that. It sits in this beautiful, frustrating space between fact and legend. It challenges our desire for a clean answer. Is it history or mythology? A bank statement or a sacred text? I think maybe it's both. Maybe the truth isn't in picking one side, but in holding the tension. The act of hiding the treasure, or of writing about the idea of the treasure, was perhaps more important than the physical objects themselves. It was an act of faith, a declaration that something of immense value could be saved from destruction, even if its location was known only to a few, and eventually, to no one. So what are we left with? A fragile, green-tinged scroll in a museum in Jordan. A list of places that no longer have names. A fortune that has never been found. The greatest treasure of the copper scroll might not be gold or silver. It might be the mystery itself. It's a 2,000-year-old reminder that history is rarely a solved equation. It's a collection of fragments, whispers, and dead ends. And sometimes, the most valuable thing we can dig up is not a chest of coins, but a better question. Thanks for joining me on this hunt through the desert sands of time. If you love unraveling these kinds of historical knots with me, please make sure you're subscribed to Hidden Histories wherever you get your podcasts. Share it with a friend who loves a good mystery. For more deep dives into the forgotten corners of our past, visit our producers at Light Knot Studios at lightknotstudios.com. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi. Until next time, keep looking.